The sound of a child crying echoed through the polished halls of the glass-walled penthouse office, cutting through the silence like a crack in crystal, and in that single fragile moment, the life of a hardened millionaire CEO shifted in a way no boardroom battle or billion-dollar deal ever had. The cry was small, broken, desperate, the kind of sound adults often ignore because it doesn't belong in places of power and prestige. But that morning, as the sun washed the city of Chicago in pale light, that cry stopped everything. Before the story truly unfolds, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of compassion to change lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. Jonathan Caldwell was a man the world admired from a distance and feared up close. At 42, he was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech logistics companies in the United States, a man whose name appeared in business magazines beneath words like visionary and ruthless. His office sat at the top floor of the company headquarters, a space defined by floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and an atmosphere so controlled it felt almost sterile. Jonathan believed order was safety. Chaos, in his mind, was weakness. His days were scheduled down to the minute, his emotions trained to stay buried beneath tailored suits and an unreadable expression. Few people knew that Jonathan had not always lived like this. Years earlier, loss had carved something hollow inside him. His wife, Rebecca, had died suddenly in a highway accident, leaving him alone with their infant daughter, Claire. Parenthood had come to him through grief rather than joy, and though he provided Claire with every material comfort imaginable, there remained a quiet distance between them. He loved her, deeply, but love felt dangerous to express. Vulnerability had once cost him everything. On that particular morning, Jonathan had brought Claire to the office because her private preschool was closed unexpectedly. Claire was 3 years old, small and gentle, with soft blonde hair braided neatly and wide eyes that seemed to observe the world cautiously, as if unsure whether it was safe. She clutched a worn stuffed bear named Oliver, the only toy she truly loved, the one her mother had bought shortly before passing away. Jonathan had left Claire in the care of his assistant and the office staff, assuming everything would run smoothly. At the same time, another woman had entered the building quietly through the service elevator. Her name was Hannah Morales, a 30-year-old single mother who worked as part of the evening and morning cleaning staff. Hannah's life had never afforded her the luxury of emotional walls. She had been raised in foster homes across Ohio, learned early how fragile stability could be, and had promised herself that her own child would never feel unloved. Her daughter, Sophie, was 4 years old, bright-eyed and curious, and on that morning, Hannah had been forced to bring her to work because her babysitter had cancelled at the last minute. Hannah knew the rules. Children were not supposed to be in executive areas, but she had no choice. Missing a shift meant losing pay, and losing pay meant risking rent. She kept Sophie close, telling her to sit quietly in a corner of the office lounge with her small backpack and her favorite plastic doll, a cheap toy bought from a discount store but treasured like gold. For a while, everything was fine. Sophie watched cartoons on her mother's phone with the volume muted, swinging her legs gently. But children, no matter how well behaved, cannot always stay invisible. When Sophie dropped her doll, the brittle plastic cracked against the marble floor. The head snapped clean from the body. The sound was sharp, final, and devastating. Sophie stared at the broken pieces in her hands as if her world had ended. That doll had been her constant companion through shelters, tiny apartments, and nights when Hannah cried quietly after Sophie fell asleep. To Sophie, it wasn't plastic, it was comfort. And so the tears came, loud and uncontrollable, echoing through a space built for power, not pain. That cry reached Jonathan as he reviewed financial projections. At first, he frowned, irritated by the disruption. Then something deeper stirred. He stood abruptly, walking toward the sound without fully understanding why. In the lounge area, he saw a scene that stopped him cold. A small girl with tear-streaked cheeks sat on the floor holding a broken doll, her shoulders shaking. Beside her stood Hannah, pale and panicked, trying desperately to calm her daughter while clearly terrified of being seen by the wrong person. Jonathan noticed everything in an instant: the worn shoes on Hannah's feet, the cleaning cloth in her hand, the way she stood protectively over Sophie while bracing herself for reprimand. And then he noticed Claire, standing a few steps away, clutching her bear tightly, her eyes fixed on Sophie with recognition rather than judgment. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt something crack inside his carefully constructed composure. He knelt down, not as a CEO but as a father, and looked at Sophie. Her grief was raw and honest in a way the adult world rarely allowed. He saw in her the version of himself he had buried long ago, the child who had once lost everything and learned to survive by shutting down. Jonathan picked up the broken doll, examining it thoughtfully. Instead of anger, his face held something closer to sadness. He motioned for Hannah to relax, though she remained frozen, convinced she was about to lose her job. Jonathan then did something no one in that building expected. He carried Sophie gently to his private office, with Claire following close behind, her small hand brushing against his suit jacket as if grounding him. Inside the office, Jonathan called his assistant and cancelled his morning meetings without explanation. The household staff, security, and executives whispered in confusion. The man who never allowed disruptions had just shut down his entire schedule for a crying child. Jonathan arranged for a replacement doll, not just any toy but a custom-made one, designed within hours by contacting a high-end toy manufacturer he had once partnered with for a charity event. He insisted it be unique, sturdy, and personalized with Sophie's name. While waiting, he let Sophie and Claire sit together on the office floor, coloring with unused presentation markers and paper. He watched silently, noticing how naturally the two girls bonded, sharing crayons, exchanging shy smiles. It was something money could never orchestrate. For Hannah, the day felt unreal. She expected termination, not kindness. Instead, Jonathan asked about her life, her struggles, her daughter. He listened, truly listened, without checking his watch or phone. Hannah spoke hesitantly at first, then with honesty, admitting her fears, her exhaustion, her constant fight to keep Sophie safe and happy in a world that offered little mercy to people like them. Over the following weeks, Jonathan's action continued to shock the household and the company. He did not fire Hannah. He promoted her to a permanent daytime position with benefits, flexible hours, and a salary that allowed her to move Sophie into a safer neighborhood. He arranged for Sophie to attend the same private preschool as Claire, fully funded, without calling it charity. He simply said it was an investment in the future. The changes did not stop there. Jonathan began spending more time with Claire, leaving work earlier, attending school events, learning how to be present rather than just responsible. His employees noticed a shift. The office culture softened. Break rooms filled with laughter. Acts of kindness multiplied quietly, inspired by a CEO who had finally remembered what it felt like to be human. But not everyone approved. Some board members questioned his decisions, calling them emotional and unprofessional. Jonathan faced internal battles, moments of doubt, old habits urging him to retreat back into cold efficiency. Yet every time he saw Claire playing happily with Sophie, every time he remembered the sound of that cry, he stood firm. Months later, during a company-wide event celebrating record profits, Jonathan spoke not about numbers but about compassion. He shared how a broken toy had revealed something broken inside him, and how fixing neither had required money, only attention. The room fell silent, many employees wiping tears they didn't expect to shed at a corporate gathering. As the story nears its end, if this journey has touched your heart even a little, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows these stories to reach more people who might be waiting for a reminder that kindness still exists. Hannah never forgot that day. Years later, Sophie would grow into a confident, joyful child who remembered the man who treated her tears as important. Jonathan would remain in her life not as a savior, but as an example of what love looks like when power chooses humility. Just before we end, we have a special request for you. Please comment below what this story made you feel, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. Your words might inspire someone else who reads them. In the end, the broken toy was never the point. It was the broken walls around a man's heart, the quiet suffering of a child, and the courage it took to stop, listen, and care. In a world obsessed with success, it was compassion that made the greatest impact, and it all began with a single cry that refused to be ignored.